Heyo everybody, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today we're here to share with you our review of Smelter on the Nintendo Switch. Now, this review was originally written by Stuart Jipp for NintendoLife.com, but was reworked into this video by me. Indie games have been imitating classics of the past for years and years now, and it's about time that one of them had the courage to take a run at the legendary ActRaiser, Quintet's 1990 genre-melting masterpiece. To be fair, there was a game called Soul Seraph which had a crack at combining top-down elements with platforming, although the results were quite disappointing. Fortunately, Smelter, rather fittingly, melds together real-time strategy with action-packed side-scrolling, and it does so with quite some skill. We do have to admit the distracting Kill la Kill-esque opening movie set did set some alarm bells ringing at first, but thankfully the product immediately won us over with responsive controls, slick visuals, and a terrific soundtrack from Evader, with opening and closing themes by the Mega Man series legend Manami Mutsume. This is a polished and wonderfully designed title from developer X+, and an absolute breath of fresh air with its strategy trappings breaking up the action gameplay pretty nicely. Much like the recent Kaze in the Wild Masks, the entrances to shorter challenge areas are hidden throughout the action stages, each thrusting you into a tricky time attack segment with specific rules to adhere to. One may have you trying to make it through an area without taking a single hit or not being seen by any enemies at all. You're able to retry these trials as often as you like though, so while some of them can be fairly challenging, they tend not to be too frustrating. They're all timed as well, meaning you can come back to try and beat your times and get some practice in with your new abilities as you gain them. Trials aside, the stages are tough but fair and ooze with strong design. New powers are introduced in fairly organic ways and are easy to get to grips with. It's not perfect though, with a handful of brief sections that seem a tad under or possibly over tested. One segment in the early game sees you evading a giant worm as it pursues you downward, and dropping down to lower levels through relatively narrow gaps is a bit fiddly when the Mega Man X style wall climbing frequently adheres you to walls even when you don't want to be stuck to one. Checkpoints do come around a little less often than we'd like, which can lead to some frustration. However, you do have unlimited continues from those checkpoints though, so that can help alleviate a bit of the potential stress. And don't get us wrong though, it's mostly good fun. Combat is crunchy and satisfying, utilizing both melee and ranged attacks, and your gradually expanding repertoire of moves keeps things fresh. Level design is pretty solid too, with stages that last just the right amount of time. Nice and meaty without overstaying their welcome. The strategy side of the game works well too. Like ActRaiser, it's not super demanding, but it is a fun challenge of pace ordering your minions to seize control of the land as Smelter, flapping around shooting fireballs at enemies with a twin stick control scheme. You'll build houses and barracks for your troops, but you'll need to keep them fed with apples or they won't help you. It's not complicated, but it's an enjoyable challenge and the presentation is superb. And in fact, it's worth talking about the presentation itself because it's pretty stellar. The game view is zoomed out enough to give you plenty of room to see what you're doing and plan your movements, and the visuals are clean and colorful. The strategy overworld segments, in our view, look a little better than the platforming, but it's all remarkably consistent and well drawn. The story is fun too, and told with breezy dialogue that doesn't take itself too seriously, and refuses to bog down the adventure with reams of words. If anything, it may be a little too loosey-goosey at times, but the real draw here is the gameplay, and we're delighted to say that Smelter delivers on that front. Smelter is one of those rare titles that takes inspiration from the classics but manages to forge its own identity. It's a breath of fresh air that uses its influences very wisely, assisted to excellence by some pretty terrific level design with only a handful of lesser segments bringing things down just a tad. The proceedings feel confident, original, and polished, with gorgeous graphics and an outstanding soundtrack that calls to mind the likes of Mega Man X4 for its action stages, and evokes Yuzo Koshiro's majestic ActRaiser score for its top-down levels. We here at Nintendo Life give Smelter on the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you'd like to check out our full written review, you can find that along with more news and information on other indie games over at nintendolife.com. Now, since this was a rather quick review, I thought I'd just bop in here at the end and throw in a few of my own thoughts as well. Now, I've only played Smelter for about 2 hours so far, but I've had quite a bit of fun with it. The platforming segments, they really do remind me a lot of Mega Man X. And there's actually a certain attack that you can do with, I believe, one of the first suits that you get, one of the first like armor pieces basically, that lets you attack mid-air. And it's super satisfying to destroy an enemy with like a little combo basically while you're in the air. I feel like that's kind of a unique thing for a platformer. You see that kind of element in games like the Devil May Cry series, or maybe in something like Nier Automata, but just in a 2D platformer, I feel like mid-air attacking that kind of like lets you stay in place is kind of unique. I could be wrong. I feel like most platformers, when you attack in the air, you just like immediately plummet down to the ground or you start to fall. But in Smelter, like I said, when you attack, you just stay in that spot, and it feels powerful. It feels good. The soundtrack is so awesome as well. It's very metal inspired, but it does have, kind of like Stuart said, this kind of majestic feel to it at the same time. I think like if they put this out like on Spotify, or if they made a vinyl of this, I think this would be one that a lot of people would be very interested in. I'd probably pick up a vinyl, which that still sounds so weird to say in the year 2021. Like, you know, everyone probably thought vinyl would be dead by now, but here we are. I will say some of the strategy sections were a little tough for me. It feels like the game sort of throws a lot of information at you at once, and it slaps in some dialogue in between the tutorial while it's trying to teach you how to do things, and it just wasn't as quick and smooth as I thought. Like, I just, you know, after playing through some of the platforming levels, I just wanted to keep playing those. That was where I was having the most fun with the game. The strategy elements, I could see why a lot of people would enjoy them, but I just don't think it was for me. But it does feel like that those parts are a necessity if you want to play this game. You actually do unlock some abilities that you can use in the platforming sections. You unlock them only through the strategy sections. And you know, if you want the game, you have to take both parts. You can't just play one, from what it seems. But I think the more I play this game, I think I'll have a better grasp on the strategy elements. Just, you basically have Zims, and those are your people, that your soldiers, and then you need to have apples, or like apple trees, in order to power them, or like to just keep them around. Like, but then you also need to have a Zim running the apple tree in order to give apples to people. Like, it was just a lot at once, and I think, you know, maybe I didn't entirely know what I was doing, and that could be some of my own fault. But, you know, I just wanted to basically get back to the platforming segments, and Stuart, though, he really enjoyed the strategy elements, so who knows how you'll feel about it. Feel free to let us know in the comments down below what you think of Smelter so far. Let us know if you're planning on picking it up, or what your favorite feature of this game is. And as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more content like this, we'd appreciate it if you smelted that subscribe button with something. I don't really care what it is, just make sure it gets a click, and we'll be all good, you and I. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zian from Nintendo Life. Stay safe out there, and we will smelt you next time. That sounded way better in my head.